Hey Algebra 1, here is your review for your quiz tomorrow. I'm going to go through each problem, and if you have any more questions, you can come before class during lunch. Other than that, this is your option to study is watch this video. Remember, you can also do the IXL that I've listed on the Google Doc. So go to the Google Doc. That is, let's see if I can pull it up. Right. So here I've listed all the different links you can use. Also remember I have Edpuzzles as well. If you go to edpuzzle.com, I have Edpuzzles for each topic that we've covered. So you can go there first to help you study. Okay, let's get started. So looking at number 1, remember that for all of these, we need to figure out, are we going to use the zero product property, number 1? Are we going to use factoring? Or are we going to use square roots? Okay, so this first one, we have parentheses equals 0. So for this, I want to do 0 product property. So I pull this to the side, 7x minus 3, and I make it equal 0. Then I want to get rid of this 3. I want x by itself, so let's add 3 to both sides. That cancels out the 3, and now I have 7x on the left and 3 on the right. And the last step you want to do is divide by 7 to cancel out that 7. And then your answer is going to be 3 over 7 for the first solution. Then you take the second one and you set it equal to 0 as well. And this is plus 6, so I subtract 6. And now I have x equals negative 6. Remember, you want to write it all as one answer. X equals 3 over 7, comma, negative 6. The other way to see this, and skip that step, is say, okay, well this is negative, and I know that this answer is going to be positive, and then the 3 goes first on top for the numerator, and the 7 goes on the bottom for the denominator. So in other words, the second number inside the parentheses goes first on top, and the first number goes on the bottom. And then here, there's no number here but in front of the x, so it's just negative 6 that we plug in to make that 0. Because this is positive, so this will be negative. Remember, x is a liar. Okay, go to the next one. Number 2. Number 2, first I look here and I say, what do I plug in here to make it 0? Well, 2 times 0 is 0. Okay, then we go here, and I could pull this off to the side and say x plus 4 equals 0 and solve that. But I also know that x is a liar, so if this is positive 4, my answer is going to be negative 4. And some of you are asking, well, do I have to show work? On these problems, I won't require you to show work because I know that you can recognize it just by looking at it. But all the other problems, you're going to need to show your work. Okay, number 3. Now here, again, 0 product, factoring or square roots. Well, here I have an x squared, so it's not going to be 0 product, and there's no parentheses. And I also have 3 terms, 1, 2, and 3. So here is where we're going to want to factor. Okay? So if you have an x squared with an x, and a number with an x, and another number, we're going to do the x. And remember, we only need to do the x and not x box because the number in the front is 1. So now 1 times 12 goes here, the negative 7 down here, and 2 numbers that multiply to 12, but then add to negative 7. Well, let's see, what numbers multiply to 12? 6 and 2, 3 and 4. Let's try those 2. Can I make 7 with 6 and 2? No. Can I make 7 with 3 and 4? Yeah, I can. But now which ones are negative? Well, this is positive. This is negative. In order for these 2 numbers to multiply to be a positive and still add to be a negative, they're both going to have to be negative. Negative times a negative equals a positive. And negative 3 plus minus 4 equals negative 7. So we only have to do the x here. And now the first binomial will be x minus 3. And the second binomial will be x minus 4. Okay, now x is a liar. So if this is negative 3, our answer is positive 3. And x is a liar. If this is negative 4, then our answer is positive 4. Okay? Don't forget the comma between the two answers. Okay, number 4. So now I have x squared and then a number, but then it's equal to 0. So as long as it's equal to 0, we're still going to factor. Okay, so now I've got two numbers with a minus in the middle. So what I'm going to do is the shortcut. If I have two numbers with a minus in the middle, I can take the square root of the first, and that becomes the first number. So square root of the first is 9x, and the square root of the second, and that becomes the second number. And then remember the signs, when you do this method, are plus, then minus. And then x equals, for the first one, I've got a number in front of x that's not 1. So I would say, okay, this is plus, so this will be negative. And then the first number on top is going to be 1. The number on the bottom is going to be 9. And then I know that the other one is going to be opposite, because this is negative, so that this will be positive 1 over 9. Okay, number 5. Now here, I've got three numbers, one with an x squared, one with an x, and one without. So that means I'm going to have to factor. I'll do the x, and because I have 2 here, because it's bigger than 1, I will also have to do the box. Okay, so now remember the top number is the first times the last, which is 6, and then the middle number goes on the bottom. Two numbers that multiply to 6, positive 6, but add to negative 5. Okay, well the numbers that multiply to 6 are 6 and 1, and 3 and 2. So can I make 5 with 6 and 1? Yeah, I could. To get negative 5, the 6 would have to be negative, because negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. But then negative 6 times 1 is negative 6, not positive 6. So that wouldn't work. And if I made the 1 negative, 6 minus 1 is positive 5, not negative 5. Okay, so 6 and 1 doesn't work. So let's try 3 and 2. Okay, so do I make 1 negative? Let's see, 3 minus 2, well that's not 5, so it wouldn't be the 2 that's negative. Okay, then how about the 3? Well, negative 3 plus 2, that's negative 1. No, that doesn't work either. So they both have to be negative. Because they both have to multiply to be positive anyway, so I'll have to have a negative and a negative. So now, let's fill in our box. So now the first number will be 2x squared. That comes from the first term. And then you take your last term and put it here. And then you take the numbers you found, and then the first one becomes 3x, and the second one becomes negative 2x. Okay, so now, for the first two numbers, what two numbers multiply to 2x squared? Well, x times 2x equals 2x squared. Or 1x times 2x equals 2x squared. Because 1 times 2 is 2, and x times x is x squared. Now, where does the 1x and the 2x go? Okay, well, let's put the 2x here and the x here. So 2 times what equals negative 3x? Well, there's no number I can multiply times 2 to get negative 3. So that means the 2 does not go there. It goes here on the side. So then 2x times what equals negative 2x? Well, that's minus 1. Then x times what equals negative 3x? That's negative 3. So there's our binomials. So now we have 2x minus 3 and x minus 1. Okay, again, this is positive, so this answer will be, this is negative, so the answer will be positive. And then I put the second number first and the first number second. But here we have an easy one that doesn't have a number in front of the x. So then it's just the opposite of the 1. This is negative, so our answer is positive. Okay, let's go to number 6. Okay, now here we've got some big numbers that we're dealing with. We got this 20, 80, and 80. If I did x with this, 20 times 80, the first number times the last, that would be 1600. And then I'd have on the bottom negative 80. Two numbers that multiply to 1600 but add to negative 80, that's going to be hard to find. So let's look for an easy way to figure out this problem. Well, is there some way I can make these numbers smaller? Well, if I take a GCF, or greatest common factor, I could. So let's look at the 20, the 80, and the 80. What's the biggest number I can divide into all of those? Well, that would be 20. And then do any of them have x's that are the same? This has x, and this does not have x. So they don't have any x's in common. So now 20 times what equals 20? Well, 1. Then we'll put x squared times x squared gives us x squared. Then minus. Then 20 times what equals 80? That's 4. But then we have an x here, so we need x. Then plus. Then 20 times what equals 80? 4. Okay, so now, again, we still need to find what makes this equation 0. So we take what's inside our parentheses, our trinomial, and we factor that. And remember, we have a 1 here, so all we have to do is the x. So now 1, first times the last, 1 times 4. Sorry. 4 here, and then the middle number is negative 4. And then it's probably going to be 2 and 2. In order for this to be negative and this to be positive on the top, they'll both have to be negative. Okay, so now bring the 20 down. Don't forget, 20 stays there. And then we'll have, the first number is negative 2, so we'll have x minus 2. And the second number is negative 2, so we'll have x minus 2 again. So now, this is negative, so our answer will be positive 2. And this will be negative, so our other answer will be positive 2. But those two answers are the same thing. So if they're the same, you only need to write 1. Don't write 2. That's blech. Remember? Blech. Alright. So number 7. Okay, now this one, we don't have 0 on the right. There's no 0 here. So we have x squared on the left and a number on the right. So this is a case where we're going to do square roots. There's no 0 to the right, then we want to do square roots. If there's just two numbers. If there's one number on the left, one number on the right, and there's no 0, square root. So now square root of x squared is x. Square root of 25 is 5. But then remember, don't forget, if I take the square root of a number, it will have plus and minus. So then for my final answer, it will be plus 5 and negative 5. Now this one, you have to look at all the different numbers here. Because over here, I had 1 and then 2 numbers total in my equation. Over here, I have 1, 2, 3 different types of numbers. I have an x squared, a number with no variable or letter, and then another number that has a different letter, x, and x squared, and 8. So if I have 3 different numbers, that means I'm going to want to get them all on the same side and make them equal 0. So that means I want to subtract this 2x from this side, and remember, subtract it from both sides. And I want to do that so that I get 0 to the right, and then all the other numbers to the left. Now remember, you cannot subtract 2x from either x squared or negative 8 because they don't have the same variables, or they're not the same types of terms. This has x squared, this has x, this has no x, and this has x. So just write it in standard form. X squared goes first, then negative 2x, then minus 8, equals nothing left on the right, so it's 0. Now we have 3 terms, so we'll factor. And we have 1 in the front, so all we have to do is x. 1 times negative 8 on the top. Negative 2 on the bottom for the middle number. And then what 2 numbers multiply to 8, but then add to negative 2. Well, it's probably going to be 4 and 2. And I need this to equal negative 2, right? and they're not both going to be negative because this is negative, so only one can be negative. So the bigger number is going to have to be negative, because remember, the bigger number wins. So if we want the bigger number to win, 4 has to be negative. So remember, we don't need the box for this one. And there we go. So we just go straight to parentheses, and then the first one will be x minus 4 and x plus 2. So again, we don't have any numbers in front of our x, so we can go straight to saying x is a liar. This is negative 4, so our answer will be positive 4. And this is positive 2, our answer will be negative 2. Okay. Now in this one, let's look at the different numbers we have. We have an x squared, and then we have a number with no x, and another number with no x. So we have two different kinds of numbers. The last time we had something like that was on this problem. We had an x squared, and then a number. And we didn't have a number with an x. So I think the best idea to do here is get x by itself. Just make it look like this problem, where we have x squared on one side, and then numbers on the right. So let's get rid of this 18 by adding it to both sides. Cancels out here. Now I just have 5x squared on this side. 62 plus 18 is 80. But again, we just want x squared on the left, not this 5. We need the 5 to go away. Just remember, before I took the square root, there was no number next to this x squared. So I need to get rid of that 5. So to do that, I need to divide by 5 on both sides. Now x squared equals 80 divided by 5, 16. Now, since I have x squared on the left and one number on the right, I can divide. I can take the square root. Oops, wrong one. So now x equals square root of 16 is 4, but then don't forget, when we take the square root of a number, there's both a plus and a minus solution. So now x can be both positive 4 and negative 4. And remember, I want you to write it out with two answers. Okay, let's go to number 10. Okay, now number 10. Number 10, I have one number here with an x squared and another number with an x. Well, you can do a couple of different things here. If I have a number with x squared and a number with an x, I can do two things. I can either do GCF or the x. And I prefer to do the quick ways or the shortcuts on these things. Okay, so here, let's just find a GCF. Okay, so let's start with the numbers, 4 and 8. So 4 and 8, what's the biggest number you can divide into those two? 4. Okay, 4 divided by 4 works, and 8 divided by 4 gives you a number without a remainder. Now, let's look at the x's. How many x's are the same? Well, we have 2 x's here, 1 x here, so they have 1 in common. So now, let's write in the rest of our factor here. 4 times what equals 4? That's just 1. And then x times what equals x squared? Well, we need to multiply x times x to get x squared. Then we write minus. Then 4 times what equals 8? 2. Then x times what equals x? Well, it's just 1. So, but we don't need to multiply times 1 because 1 is blech, right? So again, we don't need this one really either. So now, take a look at this problem and compare it to this problem we did on our number 2. We have a number with an x on the outside, and then some number, and then a binomial with 2 numbers on the inside of the parentheses. Okay, so it's pretty much just like that on this next step. So here, to get 0, I would plug in 0. And then here, I would plug in positive 2, because this is negative 2, so this will be positive 2. Some of you guys want to do the x, and that's fine, but then that takes you a lot of extra steps. Okay? And on top of that, you have a 4 here, so you may have to do the box. Here, one step, and I go straight to my answer. Okay, number 11. Okay, so now number 11, you remember back to Friday's lesson, if I have parentheses with a binomial inside, and it has this squared number here, and then these parentheses are squared, all I have to do is square root both sides. When I square root this binomial that's squared, it takes away the parentheses. It takes away the square. So now it's just equal to x plus 3. And when I square root 81, that's 9, but then don't forget, when I square root a number, there's both a plus and a minus solution. But now, I need x to be by itself. My answer is going to be x equals, not x plus 3. So I need to get rid of this 3 by subtracting the 3. And now, I'll have two possible solutions. The first one's going to be plus 9, or positive 9 minus 3, which is 6. And the second solution is going to be negative 9 minus 3, which is negative 12. Okay, that's it.